One. Hello everyone, I'm the Linkening, and this is going to be my first Trains a New Era build. This is going to be a route called the Pioneer Creek Short Line Railway. It's basically a diorama type shelf with an out and back short line that serves a few industries in a small town called Pioneer and past a little creek that is the Pioneer Creek. So I start off by basically putting down a few buildings because I'm trying to build this straight off with no real plan. I did this without much of a plan. So first bit was the few industries on the line, and then the line that branches out. And now I did the town of Pioneer with a street running section right through the middle of it. So now that I've got that, I'm basically going through and thinking. At first, I was thinking I'd put another industry here, but then I decided I would put the yard in this area. So I put an engine servicing facility and basically a small 3-track yard in this area instead. So here I'm starting the yard, basically running tracks out from one branch out, and then I get to the actual track. And I'll put down a locomotive here so you can see I'm testing to make sure the prototypical locomotive can fit and operate the yard. I put in the walls now for the model railroad because I don't want to detail beyond where the route will go. And I decided to do a little weird thing where the wall juts out just so I can have the tracks disappear beneath. So the water that appeared there, I was testing to make sure the edge of the table would be in a good spot, and it was. Well, I ended up putting the creek there, and I'm going to use water for the creek. And I'm at the far end of the route here, just beyond Pioneer Creek, where there's a runaround in two industries, the Pioneer Feed and Supply and a lumber company. Now I'm basically here. This is going to be a staging yard for the model railroad behind the wall, just so the whole system doesn't have to operate in a closed system. That'd be the interconnection with a Class 1. I ended up going with the CSX just because I have a lot of CSX equipment in my rolling stock catalog already. So here I've started on the actual details. I did a little bit on the creek, but haven't decided like all of the ground textures yet, which I needed to decide before I could fully detail the creek. I ended up coming around and doing some more like the roads and such beforehand. And at this point, most of the roads are done. There's a few more I ended up adding in. So I started doing the ground texturing, and I decided to go with more lighter colors for the ground texturing in here. Working on this bridge, this overpass that the track goes under before it goes to the creek, putting some rocks in the creek, doing basic detailing around here. So I'm testing there the clearance with the locomotive. I wanted to make sure the locomotive clears some sidings in some certain ways before I come in put in the switches, because the switches would move around if the track moves around. So now I put in all the street running. I put in concrete crossings from jointed rail, and then I put in some wooden ones on the other crossings. Now I've done a good amount of this stuff that's next to the railroad, so I'm doing some other detailing. I extend that road out and I add another road there to access the lumber company. And I give the mobile homes little fences to. And now I'm starting to do the grass texturing up to where the facade would be. I guess that's how you pronounce that. Before I do some texturing in the background here. Went with the lighter colors immediately next to the tracks, and mixed in some darker colors a little bit further back. But basically that's what I'm doing here now. There's a trailer unloading company, and I went through and put the ground textures on and then added some parking lines. And I made it look like one trailer was being pulled out. canning company there. I put some refrigerated trailers. Figured that would be the kind they would use. And now I'm back to the street running section. I actually bring in a double stack car to check clearance for this because I didn't want the street lights to be above the tracks. I just don't like the way that looks. So I went ahead and loaded in and bring in the street lights as close as I could. Now I'm putting in the last of the buildings on these streets. I end up putting a service station here, and now I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to put behind that. I was thinking of fast food restaurant, but I ended up just making it a whole bunch of alleys and the kind of place you wouldn't really want to go to. So now I'm basically doing the area around the yard, which I hadn't even touched up until here. I start by adding in a service road that accesses different parts of the yard, and I decided I would make the yard a bit overgrown, so I brought the ground texture all the way up to the tracks, and I even brought the ground height above the ballast in some points to make it look like the tracks are starting to settle in. And after that, I kind of put in the trees for the background because I don't like the way backdrops look as much. So I basically put in as many trees as possible in the areas that aren't necessarily supposed to be as visible. Basically, tons of trees, and that's what I'm doing at this point. After that, I start bringing in some grass assets to make the tracks look overgrown in parts, mostly in the yard. And I end up bringing these down a bunch. Almost all of them are below the ground for the most part because they were overpowering the tracks and they didn't look very natural. So I brought them into the ground so they were less obvious and they looked more like weeds starting to poke up through the tracks. So now I've started detailing the area behind the yard, and I decided I wanted to put one more industry in, so I moved those tracks around so I can fit the switch in, and I'm just here trying to pick some buildings to use as industry. This is the area still behind the yard, and basically here I bring in a few buildings, and there's some trees there maybe so I can make it look like the town is a little bit separated from that one industry. Now I've gone in and I'm starting to do the detailing. I decided to put in the concrete texture and I'm going to basically fence off the yard from the alley. Fix the tracks here, they were a little bit off. So I put in some dumpsters behind these buildings and I ended up deciding for one of them that it would look better if it were, or look more realistic if it were just filled with a whole bunch of trash. So I bring in a whole bunch of scrap and wrecked assets here. At this point, the route is starting to shape up. The only thing, I did go into the creek. I thought maybe it would look good if I kind of did the same thing to it. So I put in some wrecked cars and some wrecked vehicles. But I decided in the end just to keep the cars. So I'm going to get rid of the rest. And now it's basically just like a little train accident happened and they didn't clean it up. So now I'm just basically going through finishing touches, some sparse trees, and it's about the end of the time lapse. So thank you for watching, and here's some cinematics of the route.